Russian Federation is a great power dependent on the oil exports, which are going to crash it. In the early 2000s, Kremlin had to rebuild its economy after the 90s collapse, and the best way of doing it was through oil and natural gas, prices of which skyrocketed in the early 2000s. As the years went on and oil prices plummeted, the Russian economy ended up in an economic crisis, which might very well bring the end to it. In 2007, the price per barrel of oil was $157. 13 years later, that price dropped down to the point of $30 per barrel. It is important to notice that oil production constitutes 30% of the Russian GDP. The Russian economy basically runs on oil, and as the oil revenues drop, the Russian economy enters a crisis. It is hard to understand and even harder to predict the oil prices, however, they could be viewed through 2008 global financial crisis, which sent the world's main manufacturing powers into a recession, and although they recovered from the crisis, they never returned to the pre-2008 growth rates, because the world's consuming power was diminished. Thus, as the world's main manufacturing powers couldn't profit as much as they did in the past, consequently their ability to buy oil dropped, and thus the oil-producing nations had to reduce the prices in order to respond to the demand. As oil prices dropped, Russian economy fell into a stagnation, which is a period when economy almost doesn't grow. In addition, it must be noticed that low oil prices are not the only problem. Russia is in a standoff with the United States over such places as Ukraine and the Middle East. And that standoff really started in 2008 with the Georgian War, when the Russians basically pointed out at who is the boss in the post-Soviet Union. After that happened Ukraine, and on and on. And as Russia views the US military bases on its borders as a threat, it has to keep its military on its toes, as Vladimir Putin said in the recent national address. Thus, Russia can't decrease its military spendings much. Upon that, Russia views its military-industrial complex as a way of keeping people employed, because many Russians are working on those military factories. Closing them is not going to be easy. It is noteworthy that Kremlin has spent around $400 billion on its military modernization plan between the years 2016 and 2020. However, there is another major problem for the Russian government. In his 2020 national address, Vladimir Putin stated that the Kremlin is going to allocate resources to fight demographic problems. To quote, "While we have to keep our military on its toes, we have to allocate some part of the resources to combating demographic problems." While the aging population was one of the main reasons why the Soviet Union collapsed, today Moscow faces a similar problem. According to the United Nations, Russia's population could drop from 146 million, including Crimea, in 2020 to 135 million over the next 2 decades. As I already examined in the video on Turkish economic crisis, labor force is one of the main driving forces for any economy. And as Russia's population falls, its labor force will drop consequently, which means a decrease in the productional output. The most interesting thing here, I think, is that Russia might be ruined by its fight against the population decline. As it is evident that government can't just leave things as they are, it has to act. However, given the fact that Russia already uses its last reserve fund, splitting this fund in order to fight the demographic problems and keeping military on its toes while the oil prices are plummeting might prove to be ruinous for Russia. In conclusion, the Soviet Union collapsed because of the low oil prices combined with high military spendings and decreasing population. Russia today faces a very similar set of problems, and as it was hard to foresee Soviet Union's collapse in 1985, it is similarly not so evident that Russia may collapse because of the same reasons in the mid-20s. You listened to Geography and Economics. If you're interested in more videos of this sort, you could subscribe and press the like button. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.